The myth of origins. Dante had always been a seeker of truth. He spent countless nights buried in books, scrolling through forums, debating in online threads where logic often drowned in the waves of emotion. It wasn't that he didn't understand the need for cultural pride. He did. He knew history had been rewritten, stolen, reshaped by the victors. But what disturbed him wasn't the pursuit of lost heritage. It was the desperate fabrication of history to soothe wounded egos. It all started with a conversation at the community center, where elders and young men gathered to discuss history and heritage. A man named Khalif stood before the group, his voice deep and commanding. "We were the first," Khalif declared. "Not just here, not just in Africa, everywhere. The first humans, the first kings, the first warriors, the first inventors, the first Hebrews, the first Egyptians, the first samurai, the first Native Americans, the first everything." The crowd murmured in agreement. Some nodded eagerly. Dante, seated near the back, felt a familiar tension rise in his chest. It always started like this. One claim, then another, building until it formed an entire mythology. A mythology meant to heal, to uplift, to restore dignity that had been stripped away by colonialism, oppression, and historical erasure. But at what cost? Dante raised a hand. "But what about the truth?" he asked. Khalif turned to him, his expression unreadable. "What do you mean, brother?" "The truth," Dante repeated. "History is full of amazing contributions from all kinds of people. Why do we need to claim everything?" Silence. Then a chuckle from someone in the crowd. "Here we go again," a woman muttered. Dante had been here before. He knew what was coming. Khalif folded his arms and smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Dante," he said, "I respect you, brother. But you need to understand something. Truth. Who decides what truth is? The same people who erased us from history in the first place." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Dante could see the battle lines being drawn, him against the collective need for reassurance, for a history that felt empowering instead of painful. "I get it," Dante said, standing now, his voice steady. "We've been lied to. Our history has been stolen. But that doesn't mean we should build new lies just to make ourselves feel better." A younger man, maybe in his early 20s, scoffed from the side. "So what are you saying? That we weren't the original Egyptians? That we weren't the first everything?" Dante sighed. "I'm saying that our real history is already incredible. We don't have to steal from others to be proud of who we are." Khalif's face darkened. "And what makes you think you know the real history, Dante? Did you write the books? Or are you just repeating what they told you?" The crowd tensed, waiting for Dante's response. This was always the way it went. Any challenge to the narrative was met with suspicion. If you questioned the mythology, you weren't enlightened. You were brainwashed. A puppet. A traitor. Dante took a deep breath. "I don't trust everything I read, but I also don't ignore facts just because they don't fit the story. I want to believe." Khalif chuckled, shaking his head. "You sound just like them, always telling us to doubt ourselves, to question our ancestors, to accept their version of history while they erase us. But I tell you this, brother, we were here first, everywhere. The proof is out there if you're willing to see it." Dante wanted to argue, to demand real evidence instead of half-baked theories and blurry YouTube videos, but he knew it wouldn't matter. The room wasn't looking for truth. They were looking for comfort. And in a world that had stripped them of dignity, of land, of recognition, they had found it in these stories, stories where they weren't just survivors but the true originators of civilization itself. But at what point did pride turn into delusion? Dante exhaled and sat back down. He had seen this before, and he would see it again. Maybe there was no winning this argument. Maybe people needed their myths. Or maybe, just maybe, someone in that room was listening. He could only hope. The discussion at the community center ended, but the debate echoed in Dante's mind long after he left. Walking down the dimly lit streets, he scrolled through his phone, looking up studies, artifacts, genetic lineages, anything that could reinforce what he already knew. The truth wasn't as simple as people wanted it to be. History was messy, complicated, and often painful, but that didn't make it any less valuable. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind him. He turned to see a young man from the meeting, the one who had scoffed earlier. He looked hesitant, his hands stuffed in his hoodie pockets. "Yo, Dante," the young man called. "You got a minute?" Dante slowed his pace. "What's up?" The young man glanced around as if making sure no one else was nearby. "I've been thinking about what you said back there, about truth." Dante nodded, waiting. I get it," the young man continued. "It's cool to believe we were everything first. Makes me feel proud, you know. But," he hesitated, "I guess I never thought about whether it's actually true." Dante smiled. "That's the first step. Questioning." The young man exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "But damn, man, if we're not the first everything, if we're not all those things, then what are we?" Dante's smile faded. He understood that fear. Stripping away the myths meant facing an identity shaped by struggle, survival, and contributions that weren't always recognized. It meant accepting history as it was, not as they wished it to be. "We're us," Dante said finally. "A people who have endured, a people who have built, a people with our own incredible history that doesn't need to be stolen from others." He looked at the young man. "And that should be enough." The young man didn't respond right away, but Dante could see the wheels turning in his mind. The seed had been planted. Maybe it would grow. Maybe it wouldn't. As Dante walked away, he thought about the meeting, about Khalif, about the crowd who had clung to comforting illusions. He knew not everyone was ready to face reality, and maybe they never would be. But if even one person was willing to seek truth, then it was worth it. Moral lesson: truth is not always comforting, and history is not always flattering. But true pride comes not from rewriting the past to fit our desires, but from embracing who we really are, flaws, triumphs, and all. Only when we accept the truth can we truly move forward, not just as separate peoples, but as one human race.